Alright, so I'm going to do a quick rundown on how to use fractions. So when it comes to multiplying fractions, we really don't have to worry about the denominators or the bottom numbers being the same. We just multiply the top by the top and the bottom by the bottom. So if we were to multiply this out, it's basically just going to be, in a way you can write it out like this. You usually don't, but this is just another way of thinking about it. 2 times 5 over 3 times 8. And then that's going to give you your actual answer. So, 2 times 5 is going to be 10. And then 3 times 8 will be 24. So that's kind of the basis of how you get multiplied numbers. But in this case you can reduce it because since it's even, you can factor out 2. So if you take out 2 on both sides, you get 5 over 12. Now, another way you can look at this, when it comes to the beginning of the problem, what some people will do is they will cross multiply, or kind of find the greatest common factor. So, in this case, when we look across for these two numbers, we compare the 2 and the 8. Could we take out those two? Could we reduce those by anything? Well, we can't in this case, because 2 goes into 2 once, and 8 goes into 2 4 times. So now we've kind of reduced it to 1/3 times 5 over 4. And we don't really change the 3 and the 5, because if we compare those two, there's really nothing that they can reduce. There's not a greatest common factor for them. You can't take out anything to make them smaller. Anyway, so yeah, once you do this, you're just going to end up with the exact same answer. You have 1 times 5, which is 5, and 3 times 4, which is 12. So you basically have 2 ways of doing it. You can cross multiply in the beginning of the problem, or you can just multiply the entire thing out and then simplify at the end. Not too different from multiplying, but you have to start differently. So if you have, when you do that, so the big rule with fractions is just, or dividing them, is just flip and multiply. So flip, it just means that you always leave the first number by itself. You don't want to flip that. You want to keep it the same. This one, however, the 5 over 2, you want to flip and multiply. So we basically just move that up and move the 5 down. So now it's going to be pi over 3 times, and since the 2 is flipped, it's going to be on the top, so 2, and then the 5 is going to be on the bottom, so it's that. And now, like we did before, all we do is just multiply. So it's just pi times 2 is 2 pi, and then the 3 times 5 is 15. So that's really all you kind of have to know, is just flip and multiply. That's all you really need to worry about. So sometimes you'll come across fractions that are going to be kind of complex. So it's like, oh, you're dividing it by a fraction. So you just kind of apply the same method here where you flip and multiply. So this is really just saying 4. You can also write as a fraction. In this case, I will, just for clarity. So 4, because it's a full number, so it'll be written as 4 over 1. And then it's divided by the denominator, which is 7 over 10. And now, this is just what we did before. You just flip and multiply. So then you get 4 over 1 times 10 over 7. And if we want to cross multiply, we have to compare the 1 and 10. Can't really reduce that. Look at the 4 and the 7. We can't reduce that either. So we just kind of leave it as it is. So then 4 times 10 is 40, and 1 over 7 is 7. So that's, yeah, really all you need to worry about. It's just kind of knowing how to set it up. But once you do that, you're pretty much in the home stretch. So basically, when it comes to fractions, there's really two things you need to know when it comes to like adding and multiplying them, like the differences. So when you have fractions, like say if you have, so first thing, we can't add these two together immediately because the denominators, the bottom part, are not the same. And since they're not the same, you really can't add them together. They need to have the same bottom number. And so in order to get this to have the same bottom number, so like in this case, the one with the smaller denominator is pi over 2. And so when you take that pi over 2 and you basically times 4 on both sides. And by both sides, it just means top and bottom. And you just do it with this fraction. You don't do it to this fraction, just this one. Because 4 over 4 is basically just saying 1. And so all this is really doing is it changes the form slightly. It's still the exact same number, you're just slightly changing it. It's going to be the same thing. So anyway, so like we pretty much just multiply this, and you want to multiply the, the top by the top and the bottom by the bottom. So in this case it'd be, so if we rewrite it, with the pi over 8, what this would be 4 pi, and then the bottom part will be 2 times 4, which is going to be 8. So now we can actually add this because the bottom two numbers are the same. And so all we pretty much have to do is we need to add the top, and we got to keep the bottom the same. So when we, in this case, the denominator for the answer is going to be 8. You get the bottom numbers to be the same, and you add and or subtract the numerators. So it'd basically just be, in this case, pi plus 4 pi. That's just going to be 5 pi. Because 4 pi is really just pi plus pi plus pi plus pi. And so now now we have this. So that's pretty much for all you need to do for adding fractions.